Hi, my name is Camila Salas, and this week's module was all about the critical issue of ethics. In this presentation, I'll be discussing the articles that we read this week, as well as my reactions to them. The first article that we read was about confronting the challenges of participatory culture in online media. It discussed the participation gap, which talked about how technological access is more difficult to achieve than computer access. While it's easy to give students computers, it's not easy to ensure that all of them will have equal access to good internet. Students who can produce and distribute media always have the upper hand in these participatory spaces, and social factors do affect this. Students from higher SES backgrounds typically have a better time being able to be involved in these cultures. There's also a transparency problem, which means that students oftentimes have trouble understanding the media that they digest. While it's often easy for them to participate in these spaces, they don't really understand why they're doing it or the purpose behind it. Students also have a hard time determining the truth value of things that they find online, and it's oftentimes difficult for them to distinguish commercial aspects of things, since advertisers have gotten so good at integrating ads into almost everything we see online. There's also an ethics challenge, and online expression and the consequences of posting are still being learned because online spaces are so new and are still developing. New sets of ethical guidelines must be established because the current ones that we have for operating in the real world aren't translating as well as they should be online. I think that this article made some very good points that I do agree with. Participatory cultures are great spaces for learning, but we need to ensure that students have equal and safe access, and that students have the tools to help them properly navigate these new and unknown online spaces. The second article that we read was the NPR Ethics Handbook, and this discussed the 7 main principles that guide NPR's journalism, specifically the ones that revolve around social media. These include the following: excellence, respect, accuracy, honesty, accountability, impartiality, and the legal fine print. Some of the key points from this article that I found were that online interactions should be treated with the same respect as in-person ones. It's important to conduct yourself properly online. It's important to maintain and uphold quality and truth as oftentimes as possible. You should act online as you would in public, and you should also be careful about who you represent or what you advocate for online, because it'll almost always affect you and your reputation in the long run. I was really excited to see that we were reading an article from NPR, because I admire their professionalism in journalism, and though many of their standards have been made specifically for journalists, I think that the internet would be a much more streamlined and kind place to navigate if everybody took these ethical principles into consideration when posting and interacting online. The last article that we read was from USA Today, and it was written after the Boston bombings occurred. It talked about how users on Reddit speculated that a university student, Sunil Tripathi, was a suspect in the bombing, mainly from pictures that they had seen online. These speculations became so popular that Tripathi's name ended up on the top trending list on Twitter, which drew lots of attention to him. He ended up missing, and he was found deceased, and although his cause of death did take a while to determine, social media users, as well as Reddit's general manager, Eric Martin, publicly apologized to Tripathi's family for all the hurt that they caused. I think that this article was a perfect example of why it's necessary to take ethics into account when behaving in online environments. People will oftentimes forget that people online are real people who have thoughts, emotions, and lead normal lives, just like we do. And it's really important to remember that what you do online affects other people too, and just because you put something on the internet doesn't mean that people aren't going to see it. You should always be kind online, and you should really think before you post or interact with anything. The main point that I got from this week's module was that with the growth of technology and online learning, we as educators need to find new ways to implement ethical principles into online spaces so that these spaces can be well-respected, safe spaces for everybody to participate in. Thank you for your time. I hope you learned a bit more about ethical practices online, and I hope that this presentation inspired you to do better things online and to behave kinder in these online environments.